Let me check the Facebook page. I think we're about ready to roll. Yeah, we're good there.
That's what it looks like. Okay.
All right. So this is Bellator Christi podcast, season 6, episode 25, The Design Argument. And we will get started here in 3, 2, and 1. Coming to you from Pilot Mountain, North Carolina, and Ronan, Montana. This is the Bellator Christi podcast, where we take Christian truth into the arena of ideas. My name is Brian Chilton, joined alongside by the cowboy apologist, Curtis Evelo, bringing you a special edition of the Bellator Christi podcast on a special night. We are coming to you on Wednesday night. Normally and typically, I wouldn't be able to podcast on Wednesday night, but we've actually moved our Wednesday night Bible study to Thursday night this week because we have a special Thursday night service called a Tenebrae service. It's a Tenebrae is Latin for shadows, and it's one of the most powerful services I've ever been part of. And so if you're in the Mount Airy, North Carolina area, we do encourage you to stop by and join us at Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church across the road from Northern Hospital. And we're going to have a great time. It should start tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So if you are in the area, we would encourage you to come and join us. But we've got a lot of things to discuss tonight. So you won't see a podcast tomorrow night, but we are here on this special Holy Week. We're going to have, we're leading up to Good Friday this Friday and Easter Sunday, or Resurrection Sunday this Sunday, and looking forward to that. We'll have more on Holy Week coming up here in just a few short moments, but I do want to make a couple of brief announcements as we get started. Number one, first and foremost, the Bellator Christi team is very proud to announce that 2 of our members defended their dissertations today, and that is Michelle Johnson, who is our executive vice president and managing editor, a good friend of Bellator Christi. She and Curtis started with Bellator Christi about the same time. Curtis was about a month or 2 before Michelle joined on. But both of them have been just invaluable to the ministry, and we're so thankful for both of them. Michelle earned her theology, a PhD in theology and apologetics at Liberty, and like myself, she minored in church history. And so we're very proud of her. She did an excellent job. And we're also very proud of Deanna Huff. Deanna Huff is our associate vice president of spiritual growth and outreach. She serves on a team of 4 publishers at Bellator Christi, and so we're very proud of her. She did a wonderful job. In fact, one of her dissertation readers, committee readers, is a member of Bellator Christi, and that is Dr. Daniel Sloan. And so we've got so that was a good combination there. Actually, they both joined on after they already had the committee formed, so we can't say anything otherwise. But very proud of Deanna and Michelle. Like myself, they've been working on this program for a very long time. In fact, I believe, if I'm not greatly mistaken, that Deanna and Michelle and I all started at the same time. Fun fact, Michelle, unless I'm greatly mistaken, Michelle and I, our first class together was at the same time. It was on research methods, I believe. We took the same class together, and in fact, a lot of our first classes we had together, we were in the same class. So let me rephrase it. A lot of the first classes we took, we were there together, and so Michelle has been a good friend. Interestingly, though, her husband is Dr. Steve Johnson, a famed dentist in the Mankato, Minnesota area. So now the Johnson family has a Dr. Steve and Dr. Michelle Johnson. So we're excited for them. We're excited for Deanna. And awesome. So we're going to have Bellator Christi is going to be well represented at the graduation coming up this May. And so we're excited about that. Also, big news to share with you as well. I turned in the index portion of my book, Conversations About Heaven, and I heard today from the publisher that we're about 30 days out from the release of Conversations About Heaven, which should put this somewhere around May 5th. May 5th is the day we're looking for, maybe actually a little earlier than that. But coming up here in the next week or so, we should have a cover to release to you, to show you, and we'll have that, of course, on the social media apps, Bellator Christi, and keep you up to date. So, but it does look like now, it does indeed look like that Conversations About Heaven will release before season 6 has concluded. So it'll be available to you on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere the books are found. And we're going to look to build a page at Bellator Christi to have resources from our team members, not only from myself, but also for other members of our team who have written books. So we hope to have that available up on the Bellator Christi site coming up very soon. So a lot to discuss, a lot of exciting news to share with you as we get started. But now we're going to turn it over to the cowboy apologist himself, Mr. Curtis Evelo. Curtis, how you doing, my friend?
Good. Yeah, boy, just starting on our calving season this year. So we're what do we got? Like 12 to 13 on the ground right now. Heading towards I think 80 some more cows to go. So we should be, rolling pretty good. So yeah, it's been one of those, but it's crazy. The weather forecast is pretty calm right now, and it's been pretty decent, but the wind has just been horrible. It's like, what in the world is going on with this wind? I mean, I tell you, my uncle over in South Dakota, he had a picture on Facebook, a video on Facebook of they got another 11 inches of snow in Aberdeen, and the wind picked up, and everything that he had trenched out and snow blown out and moved away is all blown back in with snow. So I'll have to show you a video of that after we're done here. This is crazy.
I tell you, Curtis, we had a crazy wind coming up this past weekend. I mean, 50, 60 mile an hour gusts to the point that it knocked our power out for 24 hours. I had to, because Saturday nights when it knocked it out. So to get ready for church, I took I couldn't take a shower, but we did have some water saved. And so I had to do it the old timey style, put it in the sink, washing my hair in the sink, and by candlelight. So we were roughing
it.
Roughing it.
Yeah. That's one good thing about having the wood stove that we do have. If we need to heat up water, well, we can heat it up pretty quickly. So we do have that. So that's a benefit.
Absolutely.
Yep. So this week is a pretty special week, but let's take a minute here, Brian. And before we get into the design argument and going in through all that, because it's Holy Week, we should talk a little bit about the timelines and discussing the events that Jesus's last week on the face of this earth. And you think about it. We had a men's meeting this last weekend, and this question came up, almost identical, but to the effect of, if you knew you had 7 days left to change the world, what would you do?
Mm-hmm.
Powerful. So anyway, let's get into that. Let's talk about the last events here.
Well, absolutely. And so, looking at the events of Jesus's, well, really, I guess you'd say the starting from Palm Sunday, moving onward. Of course, Palm Sunday was the day that Jesus entered into Jerusalem he riding on the donkey. This was in a fulfillment of a prophecy given in Zechariah, and where it was talking about how the Messiah, your king, will come to you riding on a donkey, riding on a colt of a donkey. And so this would have happened on that Sunday beforehand. And then you have events that happen moving forward. You have like Jesus clearing the temple. You have this taking place early in the week. I was looking, I thought I had a timeline set up here that went that talked about each specific day. And so I was looking for that while I was going through this. But anyhow, on Palm Sunday, he's entering in Jerusalem. You have this taking place. It's like with anything else. If I'm not looking for it, it would pop up immediately.
Yeah.
But now that I'm looking for it, when
it'll show up after we're done.
That's exactly what'll happen. Here's something. We look at Sunday. Also, you see the fig tree is cursed. You see conspiracies taking place early in the week. On Tuesday, Wednesday, you probably even have. Some scholars believe you may even have the story of Lazarus, his resurrection, maybe even happening that Sunday, sometime around the early in the last week, because they were trying to hush, this miracle up because it was so spectacular, so phenomenal. So you have this conspiracies taking place. Now I've seen some things going online about some people trying to say that the crucifixion happened on Thursday. There's really no good, solid evidence to suggest that. I'm not saying that there can't be a case made for that, but I think it's taken too literally, that whole idea of 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb. I think in the Jewish understanding, even a part of a day was counted as a day. And so there's good, solid evidence for believing that Jesus died on April 3rd, 33 AD, which would be a Friday, and that the first Easter would be, or first Resurrection Sunday would be April 5th of 33 AD, which today, by the way, is today on our calendar. Today, even though it's not Easter Sunday, today is April 5th. So technically speaking, if it was the year 33 AD, this would have been the day that Jesus raised from the dead. How cool is that? But anyhow, you have this happening. Wednesday, you have a lot of things going on, a lot of messages being brought in the temple. Thursday, you have a time where Jesus is spending a lot of time with the disciples. There that evening, right around this time, they would have been in the upper room on that Thursday night. And this is why in many circles and in many traditions, Thursday is called Maundy Thursday, which means a sorrowful Thursday. This is the time when they celebrate the Last Supper together. And there's even, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 7 cups that are shared. I believe that's right, 7 cups that are shared. And each cup has a meaning to it. This would have been a Passover Seder that they would have shared together. And so they would have had the bread, they would have had the wine, they would have other things that are a part of this Passover Seder. And then that evening, then Jesus would have gone to the Garden of Gethsemane. He would have prayed in the garden Thursday evening and praying that the Father remove this cup if it be his will. And but the interesting thing about this, and I know this is going a little lengthy, but I think being Holy Week, just give us a few moments because this is important reflection. The thing about the Garden of Gethsemane is that it would have been easy. It would have been easy for Jesus to escape in the darkness, even while seeing the soldiers coming across the ravine, coming down out of Jerusalem. He could have easily snuck in the darkness and in the shadows of the darkness and escaped and avoided the cross. But he, even seeing the light from the torches coming up, he went through everything he did. And so he was arrested Thursday night. Friday morning, he would have been tried very early in the morning, and this was a monkey court. Understand, this was a monkey court. Not everyone in the Sanhedrin was there. Only those who would have supported the verdict of condemning Jesus would have been there. This was a monkey court. There were even several Jewish laws that were broken by the people who pushed this thing through. There were several things that were not done according to the law. but this was a means of trying to get rid of a problem, according to the Sadducees. And by the way, the Sadducees, now here's another interesting historical tidbit. The Sadducees would have been the ones who would have really pushed the issue more than the Pharisees would have. Because even though there were more Pharisees in the land than Sadducees were more of the political group, and they held the purse strings and they held the power. So it would have been even more the Sadducees' efforts than the Pharisees. Mm-hmm. Even all that being said, the trial of Jesus would have happened very early that morning, been condemned probably around 6 o'clock, would have been scourged probably somewhere around 8 o'clock. And the Gospels tell us that he was crucified at 9 a.m. on Friday, April 3rd, 33 AD. Now, some people believe that it's 30, and we'll get to that in a moment. But he would have been crucified that Friday at 9 a.m. Darkness would have covered the region at 12 noon, and at 3 p.m. he gave up the ghost. And it must be remembered that he was beaten very badly, was up all night, and there's other things we can mention about this. You know, he fell with a cross. Some people believe that he even suffered heart damage whenever he fell with a cross, and Simon of Cyrene had to help him up. That could have caused a traumatic injury to his heart. Even then, a lot of other issues going on. But at 3 p.m. he gave the ghost, and then he would have been buried. 6 p.m. would have started the Shabbat that evening, or the Sabbath day. So they had to get it done before 6 p.m. So I'm thinking they probably hustled to get him in the tomb by 5 p.m., sealed it up. Of course, Pilate eventually had the seal of Rome placed on the tomb so that no one could open it. And so then, of course, Easter Sunday, early in the morning, Jesus rose from the dead. So kind of give you a timeline, kind of an event. And there's a lot there. We skimmed through a lot of information there, but there's some very important information. Maybe next year in Holy Week, maybe we can take just a podcast just to talk even more detail about these issues, because there's a lot going on in that last week. A lot taking place.
Yeah. Powerful stuff. I mean, you said when he fell with the crossbeam on him, there's those that say that he could have even suffered a concussion at that moment. You know, would have been like being hit by a car. You know, the fall that would have happened.
Well, and you got to consider too that the crossbeam would have weighed 115 pounds at least.
Yeah. There's just so much that's part of that really is amazing to me. Just so many different things come up that really in my head, that just even the Passover, all of the events, the things going on, all really just ramped up. And you think about it through the timeline of his triumphal entry coming in, he was continually ramping up his description of who he is, and ramping up the what was going to happen to him. And he was really ramping up his calling his disciples up to him and calling them out and saying, hey, look at this is what's going to happen. How many times were they told? Yeah,
absolutely.
So powerful stuff. So the design argument, this is probably, if I had to pick one, it would be my favorite. This is probably my favorite because it's like, well, duh. It's just, I love it. I love it so much.
And your contribution in the book coming up is going to be on this issue to it.
What are you talking about?
Talking about the design and creation.
Keep it quiet. This is probably one of the things that just I love discussing and talking about, because there's so much that's in it. There's nothing that is unintentional about what we see today in amongst all of our lives and what we do. Nothing is here by happenstance. Nothing is here by a mistake. It's just it's mind blowing when you get into it. So
Absolutely.
I really want to dig into this. So let's go with this one. What is the design argument for God's existence then?
So the design argument consists of several different arguments from several different people that speaks to the existence of certain things in the universe designed to such a degree that they have to be in such a way to allow life to exist. If they were changed in any degree, then life would be impossible. And it's such a powerful argument because it's found throughout creation. Now, there are objections given to the design argument, but I think they're all very weak, to be honest. At least the ones I've seen are very weak. In fact, there's such power to the design argument that even Richard Dawkins, a famed atheist, when he was interviewed by Ben Stein on a movie called Expelled, he even fully admitted that the universe looked designed, but his contention was not about the universe being designed, but it was about God doing it. He believed in the whole issue of what's called transpermia, that someone who was evolved came by and seeded life on Earth. And that was his answer as to why there was design in the creation, or at least in biology, because he believed that it was designed. But his problem was that he didn't think that God did it. He thought that some alien did it instead. So anyhow, the design argument looks at the different evidences of design and creation and says, due to all of the exquisite design of biology and the design of the human DNA, information argument even fits in with the design argument to a degree, and even especially looking at cosmological constants. I mean, you have four fundamental forces in the universe. You have a strong nuclear force, which talks about the binding of molecules together. If it was any stronger, then everything would have been so bound that you really couldn't have anything necessary for life to exist. But if it were any looser, then the DNA strands couldn't entwine amongst themselves as they do. The weak nuclear force is looking at electromagnetic forces, not really necessarily electromagnetic forces, but really the forces that bind themselves together, like galaxies, the spinning of galaxies and things of that nature. Then you have the electromagnetic force. Of course, electricity. If you've worked in electricity, electricity and magnetism go hand in hand. Electricity produces magnetism. Magnetism generates electricity. They go hand in hand. That's like a hand in glove. But if they were any stronger, then life wouldn't be possible. If they were any weaker, then we couldn't even have the electrical rhythms that power our bodies and even function our heart. You look at gravity. If gravity was any stronger in the universe, then nothing beyond the scope of a bacterium would exist. But then if it was any weaker, then you'd have trees flying off or you wouldn't even have the galaxies developing in even the spinning of the Earth. Yep. If the spinning of the Earth was any faster, then you'd only have small, minute amoebas existing. But if it was weaker, you'd have trees flying off, skyscrapers flying off into space. I mean, even it comes down to, and we'll get into this a little more detail in a few moments, but even comes down to even the life cycle of the sun. Hugh Ross has even argued that we're in a perfect position in the history of the sun, because if we were about any earlier, everything would be too cold. If we were about too later in the life of the sun, everything would be too hot. That's why these issues are often called the Goldilocks zone, because everything is kind of like the whole story of the three bears, Goldilocks and three bears. The porridge was too hot or too cold, but you're looking for it to be just right. And that's essentially what the Goldilocks zone is all about. You've got to have certain conditions just right for life. And there are just so many cosmological constants, so many aspects of design in the universe, that the whole notion that this came by chance is just absurd.
Yeah. You go to the I love it how we have similar brains but different brains all in one. You go to the big, you go to the cosmos, to all of the big things that you see out there, and my mind instantly goes to the small, the minute, the little things, the cellular things that are inside our bodies that keep us running and processing things, processing oxygen, processing the food we ate, and the things that those little things just are incredible. I mean, for example, we had an outbreak years ago in our cow herd with a microbe, a little microcellular garbage that just it just caused havoc through the whole herd. It caused them to get sick. They drank water out of this one stream, and it caused everything to get sick, and we had to fight that or battle back with certain minerals and treatments and things, and that you couldn't see it. It was in the water. Even if you picked it up and held it in your hand or put it in a glass, you wouldn't see that little minute thing. And that's the stuff that just blows me away. The things that and we wouldn't be able to have medicine today. We wouldn't be able to have medicine if it wasn't for the constants of certain microbes and certain things that we can modify and make into the medicines that we use today in our normal. I mean, you go to the drugstore or go to Walmart and go to the shelf. That is so taken for granted that there is something there that can take care of an issue that we have.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Talk about big things. I guess I should have been born in Texas.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yep. So we got William Paley's watchmaker analogy. Can you give us a little bit on that?
Well, here I'm old school. In many ways, I'm old school.
I hear you.
Casio watch. I don't have.
Wait, that's not old school. That's digital. That's digital, bro.
Well, maybe I'm not completely old school, but I'm Gen X old school. I'll put that. You watched that movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
What were the watches that everybody used to want and have? What were those called?
Is it Rolex?
No. The fancy watches that are the fun colored watches that everybody had in high school and stuff,
Oh, I don't remember. I'm just thinking of that movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where John Candy's character is trying to get into the hotel, and he says, "I have a Casio." A Casio.
Oh, there's so much in that movie that I could quote, but it's not suitable for on air.
It's probably right.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you said that movie and everything come flooding back. So yeah.
Now we're all going to have to. Everybody have to watch. We'll have to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, except for one scene where Steve Martin loses it. It's really a pretty clean movie.
It is. It is hilarious.
But that tirade makes up for the rest. But anyhow, William Paley. We bring up the Casio watch or the watch because Paley argues, he makes his argument from the watch. He said if you were going out and walking on the beach and you found a watch that was wound up, it was working perfectly, you saw all the gears in there, you would automatically know that it was designed, that it had a designer.
Mhm.
So Paley, who lived from 1743 to 1805, gave the following argument. Geisler summarizes it as follows: 1, all designs imply a designer. 2, there is a great design in the universe. 3, therefore, there must have been a great designer of the universe, and it stands to reason. And this kind of really goes back to the illustration my dad often used. I remember him saying this while we grew up. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, and flies like a duck, chances are highly likely that it's a duck. So Paley would say something very similar. If it looks designed, it has all the characteristics of being designed, then chances are highly likely that it was designed. And so just as you see a watch and it has all the implications of design in it, then it only stands to reason to argue that there's a designer. And so it goes on to say the greater the design, the greater the designer. So if this illustration's given, I think, I'm not sure if Paley uses this. I think this is more Geisler. Geisler uses the illustration of 1,000 monkeys sitting at typewriters for millions of years would never produce Hamlet. But Shakespeare did it on the first try. So
I forgot that that's what Geisler said. I heard that quote one time before. Yeah, my goodness.
So he goes on to say the greater the more complex the design, the greater the intelligence required to produce it. So you think about all the intricacies of the human body, of the DNA. You think of all of the intricacies of the natural world, biology, and meteorology, and cosmology, astronomy, and everything else. Not astrology, astronomy, and everything else included in the universe. Just think how incredibly intelligent the designer of this universe must be. So that's kind of Paley's argument in a nutshell.
That's right. And the watch, I had to text my wife. I was like, I know I remember that name, but in high school, I don't know if you remember that.
What was that?
Swatches, SWAT.
Swatches. That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. Where people could switch out the bands, different colors and different things, and dating myself here. Yeah.
Well, me too. I remember them.
Yeah. So I also heard Frank Turek say one time, if you walked by a bunch of spilled over alphabet soup and it said mom, or it said clean up the mess, mom, you wouldn't look at that and be like, wow, that was crazy how it just dumped out and spelled that. You would be, even as rudimentary as it is, you would know that it was given or done or put together by an intelligent mind, by some sort of mind that actually put those things together. Yeah. So, yeah. So let's see. So the irreducible complexity, and this is one that I love, is how does it fit within the design argument that we've already established?
Let me find it here. A lot of the irreducible complexity comes from Michael Behe, and he goes on to say that in his excellent book Darwin's Black Box, provides from the nature of a living cell strong evidence that it could not have originated by anything but intelligent design. Irreducible complexity is talking about certain things, certain aspects that just could not have come about by random mutations and random chance, things that are so intricately designed that they show evidence of a designer. So like the flagellum of I think it was a bacteria, if I'm not mistaken, the little
Stephen Meyer.
tail. Yeah, Stephen Meyer talks about this, and Behe in his Darwin's Black Box. He said that the cell represents irreducible complexity, and it cannot be accounted for by the incremental changes called for by evolution. And he even goes on to say, even Charles Darwin admitted, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. That comes from Darwin himself. So Darwin says that if there are things out there that have irreducible complexity, there are problems with his theory of evolution. But in Dawkins, Richard Dawkins even says that evolution is very possibly not in actual fact always gradual, but it must be gradual when it is being used to explain the coming into existence of complicated, apparently designed objects like eyes. So he even admits that eyes look very designed. For if it is not gradual in these cases, it ceases to have any explanatory power at all. Without gradualness in these cases, we are back to a miracle, which is a synonym for the total absence of naturalistic explanation. That comes from Dawkins. So if there are things that have irreducible complexity, this poses a great problem for naturalistic evolution. Behe provides numerous examples of irreducible complex things that cannot evolve in small steps. He goes on to conclude in his book, Darwin's Black Box, on page 187, no one at Harvard University, no one at the National Institutes of Health, no member of the National Academy of Sciences, no Nobel Prize winner, no one at all can give a detailed account of how the cilium or vision or blood clotting or any complex biochemical process might have developed in a Darwinian fashion, but we're here. All these things got here somehow. If not in a Darwinian fashion, then how? And then other examples of irreducible complexity abound, including DNA reduplication, electron transport, telomere synthesis, photosynthesis, transcription regulation, and many other issues. He goes on to say life on Earth at its most fundamental level, in its most critical components, is the product of intelligent activity. And then he goes on to say the conclusion of intelligence design flows naturally from the data itself, not from sacred books, not from sectarian beliefs, but from the data. Now, that is a strong case to be made by Michael Behe.
Yeah. Those are big heavy hitters. Those guys are 100% correct in that. The flagellum is something that people could look up and see, but it's this little motor that runs inside a cell that circles around in the cell, telling the cell, a cell. Think about it, the small, you can't see a cell by your naked eye. So this little flagellum runs around in there giving information, telling that cell what it needs to do. Now the cell wouldn't know what to do without the flagellum, and the flagellum wouldn't have any way to survive or move without the cell. So there's an irreducible complexity there. Secondly, I wanted to point out something that help people understand what we mean by irreducible complexity. I use this when I'm trying to describe it. Let's first say you have a wire, you form it into a U shape and put little hooks on the end, and then you have a little hook on one end with a flat plate on it, and you push, you have a flat board on it, and you attach all of those things together, and you form and make a mousetrap. A mousetrap is at its most irreducible point to be functioning as a mousetrap. If it was any less, it would be a wood block. It would be a bunch of wires. It would be a spring. It would be, a flat plate of steel to put the cheese on. So the mousetrap is at its most irreduced state. What in this world, if we are intelligent, if we as intelligent beings can design something like that as most irreducible piece or irreducible state, what then could God, an intelligent being, do?
Absolutely.
So
Powerful statement.
Yeah. So here's one, the anthropic principle. We're throwing out big words for people today, and so but these are the arguments, these are the names. There's no real way to get around what this is. It's the anthropic principle. So what is it?
So the anthropic principle states that from its very inception, the universe was fine-tuned for the emergence of human life. And quite frankly, there are certain things even beyond the scope of this planet, even beyond the scope of our solar system. There are certain things within the complexities of the universe itself that have to be just so finely tuned to allow life to exist. Now, we talked about earlier about the four fundamental forces, the strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force. All those have to be fine-tuned to a certain degree, or life would be impossible. Life just couldn't exist. And so the anthropic principle states that from the very inception, the universe had to be just so to allow life to exist. And so there's some examples given here. So Hugh Ross suggests even oxygen comprises 21% of the atmosphere. If it were 25%, fires would erupt, and if only 15%, humans would suffocate. If the gravitational, if the gravitational force were altered by merely 1 part in 10 to the 40th power, that's 10 followed by 40 zeros, the sun would not exist, and the moon would crash into the earth or veer off into space. If the centrifugal force of planetary movement did not precisely balance the gravitational forces, nothing could be held in orbit around the sun. If the universe were expanding at a rate of 1/1,000,000th more slowly than it is, the temperature on Earth would be 10,000 degrees Celsius. Imagine that. Even the expansion of the universe has to be just so, or life would be impossible. If Jupiter were not in its current order, the Earth would be bombarded with space material. If the Earth's crust were thicker, too much oxygen would be transmitted to it to support life. If it were thinner, volcanic and tectonic activity would make life untenable. And if the rotation of the Earth took longer than 24 hours, temperature differences between night and day would be too great for life to exist. Think about this. Two of the brightest objects in the sky are the planet Venus and the planet Mars. Now, you think about this. Now, Mars could be colonized. Venus cannot. But without special instrumentation, without special devices, human beings can't live on either planet. Mars is too close to the sun for life to exist. Mars is a lot like Earth, but it's too close to the sun. So if you go there, it's like going into an inferno. It is very hostile to life. I mean, even some of the instruments have a difficult time surviving with even some of these explorations to Venus, because it is just too hot. If memory serves, I believe some places on the planet are just acidic. It's just not habitable. Think about Mars. Mars is a little farther from the sun. Again, remember the Goldilocks and Three Bears? Venus is too hot. Mars is too cold. Mars is just way too cold for human life. But it is more reasonable to colonize on Mars than it would be Venus, because Venus, it's just like Hades there. It's just way too hot. And Mercury, as they say in New York, forget about it. It is just way too hot and too close to the sun to even have a chance. Jupiter, Saturn, all these other big planets, they don't have a rocky core to them. This all gaseous planets. So again, you have to have certain conditions just right for life to exist. And so, I mean, you just can't chalk this up to chance. It's more than just chance.
Yeah. There's so much there, the gravity being moved to the 40th power one. Just you think about that number is so hard to even conceptualize in our heads, let alone be able to see the movement of that. It'd be, and it'd be moved just a little bit to the left or the right of that, of where it's at, and we would all be gone. It's incredible.
Geisler even notes here, he said that former atheistic astronomer Alan Sandage came to the same result. Sandage, a former atheist, when looking at the design argument, said this, and this is his words: "The world is too complicated in all of its parts to be due to chance alone. I am convinced that the existence of life on Earth, with all its order in each of its organisms, is simply too well put together. The more one learns of biochemistry, the more unbelievable it becomes, unless there is some kind of organizing principle, an architect for believers." That architect being God.
Yeah. Incredible. When we get into these kind of things, these are powerful arguments. Just in the fact that you have people that can mess around with chemistry. Just for example, you got scientists messing around with chemistry. If the oxygen wasn't right the way it's supposed to be, they wouldn't be able to perform their experiments. If the heat and the hot and the cold was too drastic from being, spinning a little slower, we wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't be able to thaw out in the morning or in the day. We've frozen. It's just so many things that are just too suspicious to being just right.
Absolutely.
So let's go back to Thomas Aquinas then. Thomas Aquinas had a version of the design argument. What is that?
Just wanted to hit on this just very slightly. Thomas Aquinas, he's known a lot for his cosmological arguments, but he actually gave a teleological or design argument. Many times the design argument is called a teleological, teleos meaning end or goal. He gave this type of argument. And so this is actually his the fifth of the five ways. This is the last of his five ways. He gave this argument something like this: every agent acts for an end, even natural agents. Now, what acts for an end manifests intelligence, but natural agents have no intelligence of their own. Therefore, they are directed to their end by some intelligence. And so you can even use this in what we're talking about here. It drives me crazy on nature shows where you hear people say nature created or nature directed, but nature is an inanimate object. It's not a living, breathing force. Nature is just a set of all natural things. And
That's
so by doing that, you're already implying that an intelligence of some sort exists. So if you go back and remember on Jurassic Park, Goldblum's character, I believe I'm saying his name's right, he says talking about the dinosaurs, they're supposed to be all females, but yet they're having babies, and he just says nature has a way. or nature gives life. Nature has a way of coming through. But how does nature do anything? If nature is just a set of all living things, nature will find a way. That's right. It's late. It's been a busy day. My mind ain't working right. But nature finds a way. How can nature in and of itself do anything? Because nature is just a set of all the natural of the natural world. That terminology itself argues for an intelligence. So since nature is not an intelligence itself and is directed toward a certain end, Aquinas is arguing that itself argues for an intelligence, and that intelligence we know to be God.
It's so good. And and think about the date of when Thomas Aquinas was on the earth. So think about that.
Very intelligent man. One of the even if you don't agree with all of his perspectives, he is one of the most intelligent theologians of all time. I mean, he is top three. I would say at least top five, but definitely I think I would even say top three. Just again, even if you don't agree with all of his perspectives, I mean, many people gave up on him. They called him the fat ox because they didn't think he was a large structured man and didn't think he would amount to anything. And come to find out, he did far more than anyone else in his class.
You said a while back, how many pages did he write?
Well over 10,000, and this is well ahead of the advent of typewriters. He wrote it by hand, by candlelight, and
my hands
researching
cramping.
old school style. Yeah, man.
My hands cramping just thinking of that. So we really don't have time to go into the objections against the design argument, but what are kind of like the heavy hitters? What are some of the stuff that are the most people use?
A lot of times people one of the biggest ones I think that are out there is the argument, but I think Lawrence Krauss has used this, and many other atheistic philosophers and cosmologists will say this. They'll say simply, because we exist, of course the universe looks designed. Because if it were any other way, we wouldn't be here. So a lot of times they'll argue going back to a multiverse or to these. If you remember back to last episode, we talked about these different wiggling brains. If these BRANES, these planes of existence, and if they bump into one another, it pops out a universe, or these bubble universes that floating around, and if they bump into one another, they pop out another universe. I mean, the thing is, there's no evidence for any of this, but they're using this as a philosophical way of trying to find a way out. They're trying to find an escape hatch to what is blindly obvious, in my opinion, and that is that there is some divine intelligence out there. And so if you go back and say, well, if you have this super universe generator, then eventually it's going to get the circumstances just right and produce life. But there's problems with that, because there are situations, and I'll be honest, I'm too brain tired right now to even recall, to bring it to my memory, but there are even certain circumstances and situations right now in the universe that show that even can't exist. That can't even be the case, because even if there were such a super generator, there would be better signs than what we have. Quite honestly, a universe as ours looks just has all the telltale signs of design, and there's no evidence of a super generator, a universal generator. And even if there were, you're still left with the same problem you are with a multiverse. Where did the generator come from?
Right.
And if it's a natural system operating under natural laws as we know it, as we understand them now, then it would have had to have the second law of thermodynamics going on. So that means that at some point it had to have a beginning, and then you're left with the whole issue of the chicken and the egg over again. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, so you're not getting away from it. The problem is all of these ideas, cosmological ideas, are just used as escape hatches as to what is blindly obvious, and that is that this universe is designed. It looks designed. It has all the evidence of being designed, and it goes back to that whole illustration of a duck. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, chances are likely it's a duck. And then, of course, you have issues. Some people say they'll use chance. Some people say, well, given enough time, then things will come about. But there are really a lot of holes, a lot of problems in all of those arguments. If you were to go through them one by one, you'd find that they just really don't hold.
Yeah,
but that's really the biggest. Summarize. That's sort of the biggest objections.
Yeah, it still always amazes me that it's the given enough time. Time is always you could say the point, that they try to stretch, but yet we can get to a point where there's so much time there that it isn't even feasible, even practical.
Well, and you have a problem. You even have a problem going back to the Cambrian explosion, because there was an epoch of time where you had a time frame where, according to what the fossil record shows, you have a time frame where there wasn't anything there in the fossil record, and then there's this huge explosion at one time where you have all this life coming out in an instantaneous moment. Where this life just comes it begins, and it didn't come about over time. It really came about at a certain point, and that really isn't what the whole argument for this long, tenuous time frame to produce certain things really says. It's not what the data says. It's not what the data suggests, from my understanding of it, at least.
So, the last one here: if we're left with the options of chance, time, nature, or design, which one of these holds the greatest of weight?
Okay, mathematically, it's said if you go to an exponent of anything greater than the exponent of 10, then it is mathematically impossible for chance to account for the existence of something, or for something to be about by chance alone. And it seems like, if memory serves, the odds of life existing in this universe with all the conditions given, it's something like 1 to 10 with 150 zeros behind it. It's just mathematically absurd to consider that chance alone could give rise to life as we know it. If you hold that chance is only possible with 1 to the 10th with 10 zeros behind it, and then you go 150 zeros, it's just a mathematical impossibility for chance to ascribe the existence of why we're here. Time, we've already mentioned the problems with time. If you look at the fossil record, Cambrian explosion, life came about in one moment. And so, if you have a rock sitting there in a vacuum for 1,000,000 years, after the 1,000,000 years, you're still going to have a rock in a vacuum unless something else happens. So time is not really the answer to this issue. Nature, as we've mentioned, nature is an inanimate set of all natural objects. It is not an intelligence. It's not a force in that regard. So nature can't do anything of itself. As Thomas Aquinas suggested, when things don't have intelligence within themselves, they must be directed by an intelligence outside of them, outside of themselves, and that intelligence must be God. So, given all the options we have on the table, laying the cards out on the table, chance doesn't work, time doesn't work, nature doesn't work. So the only thing that really does is design. And design speaks strongly for a designer, and that designer, that architect, that intelligence, we would understand to be God.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you look at a building, you look at that building and say that building didn't just happen to pop into space and plant itself right there in the perfect space, and have everything formed just right. You know that building had a builder.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I was wanting to touch on with nature, the design argument, or the nature argument. When we were talking about it, it hit me, but I didn't say anything about it. But think about this: in nature, uh, uh, nothing gains. Everything is in natural. Its natural progression is to devolve, is to fall back, is to simplify, is to find its way back to a simple state.
Or lose its energy. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Well, there you have it, folks. That's the design argument, and there's more. There's more to come. We certainly do enjoy the fact that you've came here and spent the time together with us, and we value that time. Our prayers that this podcast helps stretch your mind and becomes a place to strengthen your faith as we strive to create an atmosphere of discussion and become a reliable source of information. Join us next time on the Bellator Christi podcast. Until next time, Brian and I say, soldier on, friends.
Soldier on, friends. Let me add this.